And let's get into our lesson for today. Let's open up Logic Pro and let's go into a previous project just so we have things set up a little bit here. We'll go into a recent project. I'll go ahead and drop on into the Be Good When You're Gone. And we're going to go ahead and unsolo this, and we'll actually, this was all our violin, and we'll mute these up. We'll hide them as well so they're not part of our project, and then there they go. So very quickly, I can mute and hide and get rid of things, but not really get rid of things. They're still here. See, there they are. And I'll mute up some past vocals. We actually might work on this one a little bit. Yeah, I like this section because of what this section is. So let's listen to the original song and what was going on, and then let's try to, kind of recreate that moment in the song, which is what this is a cover song. So let's take a listen to the actual original song and see how they use reverb or delay to kind of create this really cool part of the song. So there's about, what was that, 4, 8, 16 bars of this vocal, really long reverb information. So one of the tracks that was pre-recorded and done with some basic reverb and delay sounded a little like this. When I'm gone. So that was obviously created with a very long reverb tail, but that was actually created with a very basic, supermassive Valhalla plugin. And we actually went into this, and you could see that on bus number 3, we used just a regular chroma verb, which is one of the reverbs that are, part of Logic now. Chroma verb, N verb, silver verb, and the space designer. So the original sound here for this backtrack was using a stock reverb plugin, not the one we're going to look at today, but we're going to switch it over to the one we're looking at today to see the differences. All right, so here's both of those tracks in chroma verb and supermassive. So we're doing some harmonies there, and we are trying to really create space and size in that backtrack. Let me just let Jake in here for a second. There we go. So what I did here for this one, again, we bust out chroma verb, and bust, I don't mean B-U-S-T, I mean B-U-S-S-E-D. We bust it out and then, put a little bit of the signal into the auxiliary track. This is what I typically like to do when it comes to, space and time-based plugins. We know this. This is a standard lesson that we taught for a very long time in every single one of the softwares that we use. So on the actual track, though, you'll also notice that there is a space designer plugin. So we did like an initial version of the reverb, and then we did a even further, longer version of the reverb. All right. So again, I know I always say I like to put the reverb plugin, anything that has to do with time, on a bus, but some cases when you want to compound that and you want to really create an effect, you might have to go back to the original track to get that effect. Because if I were to put the space verb here and then do the direct mix, it's going to sound a lot different. It's not going to be the same signal path that we had when I was doing it this way. And I tried it a couple different ways to see which one would be better or more suited to do like a backing track to the main vocal part. Again, the main vocal part was this. So that sounds great. And then the backtrack with it sounds like this. So you can see that there's a little more time and effort put in there with really opening up the signal even more, because in the original track, there's a lot of space there. So that's what we did. So now let's, instead of using our chroma verb here, let's go back and now add our brand new space designer into the signal path. Again, without that, it does sound not as spacey because I did not include a lot of the wet signal. Only a little bit of the wet is creeping in. So you can see that I didn't use a tremendous amount of it. I did use all of the dry and just a little bit of the wet. So it's not an overpowering reverb signal to start when we're bussing it. We'll have to now really enact the reverb plugin here on the bus. So we have the original signal that does go through audio 3 and off to the main mixer or the stereo output. And now we have a bus setup that's going to give us our second level of reverb to really open this up. So let's go into, again, reverb. And now let's go into our space designer. And we are going to put it into stereo. We're not going to keep it as mono because not quite as effective, to be honest with you. So in this case, I am going to keep the dry muted. I'm not going to have any dry signal in this mix. I'm going to keep the wet around -10. And then I'm going to start looking for a longer reverb signal than possibly what we had before. Let's see if there's a way I can get back to see what that reverb signal was. Let's go on this track here. No, I can't get you back there, which is fine. But let's test it out. So we're going to go ahead and solo these two guys up. Again, we're going to put our space designer on stereo. And again, here's our IR. So right now we're going to be listening for, and I am going to be playing this back with both signals in the mix, just so I know that together they really opened up and created this nice big sound. We'll go through the space designer, all the ins and outs of that in a second, but I just want to choose something first so then I have some sort of pathway to the next step. So let's see how this 1.8 large and bright signal comes through. Okay, it's not bad. I don't mind it. It is the factory default here. It is a sampled IR as opposed to a synthesized IR. Let's just review what that means. So a sampled IR was actually something that was done by an engineer with specific tools that allowed them to get a concept for a space. So they actually did travel to a space. They went to a physical location in the world. They were able to get or send signals into the air, bounce them off, capture them back. So we have a moment of direct sound, the moment that you would hear it directly, and a moment that would happen afterwards, which then would account for the reverb sound. They then compile that, give it a time between direct and indirect sound, and give it an assignment, whether it was a very bright signal coming back, a very muffled signal coming back. All that has to do with the signals down, or the parameters down here below. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the sampled IR is an actual space, an actual place in the world that someone took a sample of and was able to recreate in the software using math and science. The synthesized IR, they don't sound terrible, but you can see that things change here in the waveform. So the actual signal is different. It doesn't even tell me what my synthesized IR name is. I don't even know what the timing is. It looks like the decay is 3 seconds, but it doesn't tell me my total time. So my sampled IR gives me a little more information in this point because it was created from an actual space by an actual person. They were able to figure out all that information. Just traveling backwards just for a moment, we do have all our presets here. And you might notice there are a few more presets in some of these. Now, there's so many as it is that what are you going to count them all and just see what the difference is between the old one and the new one? No, you're not going to do that. But, you know, these reverbs have a time element to them, and then they have some sort of description to them, letting you know what you're going to be here, as you know, as in as least words as possible, like big concert hall or school or arena. Outdoor spaces and warped spaces, which then now start including effects, you know, whether it be LFOs or whether we're including distortion or really defining settings in an LFO or a high-end cutoff. And again, all separated and organized by time. Large spaces will be somewhere around, you know, a second or more. Medium spaces are between like 0.5 and 1 second, and small spaces are usually under 0.5, although there are a few here that are above 1 second. So there is a little crossover, but it also has to do with, you know, the speed at which it comes back and how long it takes to decay. Those all determine time. We also have the general thing of warped and surround sound spaces if we're working with a 5.1 surround sound mix. And then HD spaces is interesting because, well, we're not really dealing with HD quality audio, but because HD has such good resolution and detail in it, they made a list of presets where the reverb can match that detail, where the actual like little nuances of Michaelis's Hall or Michaelis's Abbey or the Villa Wine Cellar, they will come through. So if you're dealing with high resolution audio somewhere around 96 kilohertz or more, you could actually go into the HD surround spaces. And again, you're also working with surround sound too, right? Remember? So it's surround sound and then HD surround sound. And what I'm saying is they just have more detail in how they bounced around and what information came back with it. So let's take a look at how this affects the entire mix. Again, we played it back with just the two signals, just the two audio. Again, here's what it sounds like. And more than likely, we'll layer in more vocals, but right now we want to get the main vocal and the immediate back vocal good. And they're just a touch out of time on purpose so they don't interfere with each other because they're roughly in the same key. So now we're going to go ahead and kind of mess around with some other presets. 1.8 isn't that bad. Let's go into a medium space. Let's find ourselves something that's going to bounce a little more. You can see drum plate, blue plate. Those are all good. Some gated ones means they'll cut it off before the reverb comes back. It looks like my 1.8 won't go much beyond medium. So maybe I'll go into large to see if a much larger place would really feed better into the mix. Let's jump up to a 2.2, a large choir hall. Let's see how that sounds in the mix. When I'm gone. So a lot more resonation in the space, a lot more detail coming back, and it also is taking over these low end and high end spreads. So I'm actually getting a little more of that low in this reverb preset. The length right now, as we said, is 2.3, as it says 2.2, but I'm sorry, 2.23. But we can actually change that here. So like I said, it's always nice to have a preset to give you a head start, so you don't have to now touch every single dial when dialing in what reverb sound you want. The one before that, the preset that was 1.8 large and bright, you know what I might want to do? I might actually want to see if this this large choir hall at 1.8 sounds similar. Because there are definitely differences over here on the crossover and the spreads. The dry and wet stay the same. The real changes happen in here as well for time. So let's drop it back down to 1.8 and let's see if that has any true effect on the signal. When I'm gone. It's not bad. I don't mind that. I'm not sure if I would, truly want to change the size, though it does help with the amount of space. You're still going to get your signal bouncing back to you at 1.8. But if you increase this, there might be more decay over time, so it might last longer. Now, that's cool, but what happens at the end of this when the signal should be ending and we're into another part of it, right? So we're in the last 4-bar loop of the woes. Let's see if it blends too far into the next part. It's actually not terrible. I'm gonna be honest with you. It doesn't have a huge effect on the final outcome, so I'm okay with it. It really drops off pretty considerably, even though I have these fades here, right? So these fades actually are really doing well for cutting the signal off. You still have sound kind of floating around in the space designer a little bit. So that's one thing that you really want to think about. Oh, here's my chroma verb. Nice. I just undid a bunch of stuff. Let me put back in the space designer. We went into a large choir, and we dropped it to 1.8. There we go. Just redoing everything there. I mean, yeah. So what you're going to get as a result is this nice big spatial area. But again, throwing the volume down on the original track doesn't mean that there's still not sound floating through this. Let me show you. Case in point. Look at the auxiliary 3, this bus. Watch its VU meter even after the sound has passed these two, or actually it's just this one. As soon as I'm cut out, there's still sound floating around in here. Watch. I'll back it up just a little bit. See, it's still happening even after the signal. Even after I've cut the valve off and stopped feeding signal to the space designer, there was still something happening over here. Now, that all can be changed, obviously. I can actually, instead of creating a fade of the track, I could just create an automated fade to the bus. That's another technique that people use to really control how sound is being done. So let's get rid of that fade for just a moment, okay? And let's go into our bus, main, send. We're at what, -15 or so it says here. So yeah, about -15. And then we're going to cut it off. So I'm going to go ahead and create my automated fades, and then I'm just going to cut the valve off. Right? I'm not going to fade the actual original track. I'm going to cut the valve off. Let's see if that has a big difference in the mix. Let's go into it. I'm just moving the mic back down here. It actually feels a little smoother. I don't know if you guys can tell from your end, but it actually is a much smoother transition from point A to point B here by automating the bus, turning the valve off to the space designer sooner. So by the time you get out of the track, out of the clip here, you're gone. There's no more signal. And because you did a nice slow fade out, you're slowly removing all of the energy pumping into the space designer, and you'll be able to get rid of that, let's say, reverb tail a little faster. I find that to be a very clever trick. Instead of fading out the track, fade out the bus, because on a track, once it ends, it ends. And my next section starts right here or so. So as long as I'm out within a couple milliseconds of that last note, I think I should be good. I think it should just blend nicely out. Here it is again. Yeah, it's a much smoother transition now without utilizing a fade. I'm actually just utilizing a automated bus valve cutoff. It's a nice way of putting it. I'm going to leave the main ones there, though. The main ones should be the ones that will continue on. Those are the ones that should sound like they do. Sorry, let me let Isaiah in here really quick. I'm trying to keep an eye on the participant waiting room as best I can while I'm doing these demos. So by cutting off the valve of the bus send, I think we create a much better way. And then I'm going to leave the main vocal track in there to kind of reverb out naturally. And then, as you can see, there's another whole section of verses that are going to happen here for the rest of the song. So again, bringing it back to the very beginning of this part, here's what that sounds like with, I think the drums are in there. All right, here's what it sounds like with the reverb in there and cut off. We'll listen to these full 16 bars here. Yeah, and it nicely rolls off right there at the end to allow the next verse to kind of start up again, which is very, very cool. So that is proper use of the Space Designer plugin. Again, I'm bussing it out. I am using it over here. For those of you who are still kind of confused of what I use for my channel strip lineup, um, again, I am going to use EQ and compression. I then had some sort of pitch correction on there, which actually I don't need anymore. Space Designer was on here, but very, very weak. It was a 3.6, and again, full dry signal. So I'm barely creeping in a little bit of the wet on this one. And I'm just creating some like pre-reverb in a way that makes it sound open. But then we wanted to open it up even more with the main vocal track. We really wanted to spread it out. We actually use something called a direct mixer, which is like this stereo spread. Instead of having it very mono centered right here in your between your eyes, what we're doing is we're pulling it out from the center, completely pulling it out from the center. I have an idea. Let me show you what all of that means, because and by the way, we have this new cool thing called multi-effects. We'll try to get to that today as well. I want to do some metering, and then we'll do our no multimeter. Let's see what that looks like for now. I want to see the goniometer. There it is. So here is the signal. We're going to mute that for a moment. And this is the signal going through the goniometer. And I'll turn this on and off, and you'll see how much it spreads out the signal side by side. Direct mixer is just really, wide. So you see right now, without the stereo meter, the direct mixer on, it's very, very mono. It's straight up and down here. But when I pop this bad boy on and I spread it out a little bit, hold on. Where the hell did it go? Hello. Hello. What's going on here? Yeah, see, now you can see how I can tilt it off to the right or the left here, and you can see how it sits right on the left ear. It sits right on the right ear. It's still not a full wide stereo sound. Even if I do that, it's still not going to be perfect. But there are ways of messing around with the sound to put it in different places. Now, if I wanted to split out the low frequencies and high frequencies, the direction mixer will allow me to spread only the highs and keep the lows relatively centered. That's always a fun one to do. And you can see how that plays out here on the mixer here, on the analyzer rather. And let's see what else I can do through this. Now, they really haven't changed the analyzer and the goniometer in Logic 10.5. That's what I was just checking, make sure nothing had changed. Yep, it all looks pretty good. So yeah, the directional mixer has some really cool features that allow you some, different major changes, actually, we'll say. And then again, without it on, and I'll let you hear it now. So here it is. Here's without the directional mixer. Here's with it on. So what you heard was the backup vocals were kind of loud previous to the directional mixer. And once the directional mixer came in, it actually pulled it way out. And in a sense, it dropped it in volume. It's already down in volume, as you can see, but this even pulled it further out of volume. This is why I'm trying to create that background track. It doesn't need to be the main vocals. The main vocals are great by themselves. Right? They're fine as they are. But I don't want to overpower those. As a background vocal, it should sit in the background. So you don't want to be loud. You don't want to be mono. You want to be stereo spread, and you want to be dropping that down a lot before you end up, creating a signal that you're trying to muscle through. And then you also have to worry about the guitar and the drums too in this track. And as we said, there's also going to be a string section of this, and I didn't even have the bass lines in this just yet. So there is a lot of work to be done here, but we also have to keep in mind the broader picture. Are my vocals going to continue to sit on the top of the mix, or because I'm adding background vocals, because I'm going to be adding strings and bass, is it going to get flattened and shoved to the back of the room? You don't want that. right? So these are all the steps I would be taking to create that final moment, because again, you don't want to get halfway through mixing and then find out, oh no, it is not quite what I was looking for, or I have to go back to step number 4. I'm at step 40, and I have to go back and remix things from the beginning. As I'm making changes and I'm making buses and plugin settings, I'm always keeping in mind the bigger picture. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the sauce. I love that expression, lost in the sauce. All right, so let's take a look at, first of all, any questions about, let me put my bus back on. Any questions about Space Design? I really didn't spend a lot of time in it because we've already spent time in it. All the other settings are the same. Like I said, they just changed the layout. It used to look a lot uglier, in my opinion. It used to look dated. So now the new and improved version, again, same parameters, same sections, where you have your volume envelope, which is what this looks like. Since this is a non-warped sampled IR, there's not going to be any filtering going on, but we could activate the filter and change things. It is stereo, and our output is kind of cool that we can actually change a little bit of the EQ. So if I wanted to create a roll-off here, I could roll off the low ends. I could roll off the high ends and only be taking into account the mid frequencies for the reverb signal coming back. So that's, again, that was there all the time. It just looked a lot different. It was all bunched into that little window. Now it's a little more spread out and accessible. Also down here at the bottom, we mentioned, quality, in regards to high definition versus low definition, or, very detailed versus non-detailed. I always like to leave it as high in regards to the quality of the reverb that I'm using. I'm not going to use an offset, but this basically means that it'll start after the first attack. So you can do that if you'd like. That's always something you can change, something you can mess around with. I recommend, again, playing with parameters and seeing what the differences are. We could reverse the actual reverb, so it'd start really long and then kind of suck up a little bit. Not a bad idea for some things. In this case, probably not. I'm not actually reversing the audio. I'm just reversing the way the reverb works in this case, right? Because this is all within the reverb plugin. Down here, again, you get the pre-delay, so you can offset the delay to start later. Our length of time, how long that signal takes to final decay, the size of the room itself, the crossover in regards to frequencies. So if you only want the frequencies from 710 to 16K, that's what I'm doing. I can include some low ends, but I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as it was, 710. We could spread out low and high separately. We kind of did that with the directional mixer, but if you didn't do it with the directional mixer, you can do it here. Right now, it's fully spread out, low and high, but we can change those things. We can make the low only 50% spread as opposed to 100% spread. And then finally, as you know, we have our dry signal versus our wet signal. So the dry signal on a bus is going to be at 0. And on a bus, you're going to have the wet signal be the only thing that you're going to be hearing. And then you're going to use this valve right here to control how little or much is going into the mix. So if I wanted to reduce the amount of that Space Designer, I'm just going to pull this down. If I want to increase it, I'd pull it up, and there it is. I can get rid of the multimeter now. All right, let's talk about reverb. Let's talk about delay. We did all the reverb stuff, and now we have to do a delay. What I'm going to do to make this happen is I'm actually going to create a brand new duplicate track. So I took track 3, which we were using here for this. I'm going to make a duplicate track of that. Then I'm actually going to duplicate these signals and bring them down. So I'm actually do a copy of those. And in the meantime, I'm going to mute this, stick this in the hidden package, and now I got a brand new track to work with where I can start messing around with some delays. Now, when I duplicated the track, it also duplicated the bus. So if I go into my bus right now, it's still routed to the Space Designer. And we were just using that Space Designer bus 3 for fun. I'll probably end up going back to the Chroma Reverb because that's the way I mixed originally. Let's go into our mixer and start a brand new auxiliary track. If you do not recall how to do that, select where you're going to want it relatively. Go to Options, Create Auxiliary. We're going to give it a bus 4 because we were using bus 3 just a minute ago. I have bus 4 to use. We'll use bus 5. Okay. We'll go ahead and crank that way up for now. And now over on our brand new track, it's audio 8, we're going to change that bus from 3 to 5. Boom. So now we have the signal traveling over into the bus 5. All right, input, output, good, 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 good. Great. And there it is. So let's go ahead and throw in our brand new delay designer. So we'll go down to delay and we'll go to delay designer. We'll go stereo. And oh, look at that. Maybe I didn't download it. Oh, crap. It's not part of the package. Well, here's a good lesson for you. Ready? This is what Space Designer used to look like, right? This was the old antiquated layout. It looks all right. There's nothing wrong with it. But just look at where all the parameters are. They're just all bunched up in these weird layouts, and I it's not something I was really fond of. That's why I went over to third-party plugins for a very long time, because these really didn't give us that comfort, that visual stimulation that we were looking for. And I definitely did not download the new package for delay. I must be in an additional download that I must have missed, because there are still some stuff I haven't downloaded. Yeah, I'll have to go back through that. I checked that before. I thought I had it. Anyway, but the delay designer pretty much gave us the exact same layout as the new Space Designer, right? It looked very, very similar to this, where it's just, again, clean, neat, updated, modern, that kind of thing. With that said, then because there's not much I would can show you right now. I'm not going to go through 10 minutes of installs to show you that. Let me go into the new multi-effects, because I know we kind of jumped on that for a moment. So this is kind of cool. It's a newer version of Logic's plugin, and you could see that it looks, right? It looks different. What they did was try to compete with Sound Toys. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that plugin package, but they have a bunch of different plugins that have like funny names like Analog Boy and Bit Crusher. And I think I actually have some Sound Toys plugins. Let me see what I have here to show you. I do. Yeah, Pan Man, Little Plate, Echo Boy, Devil Lock, Crystallizer, CQ, Primal Tap. Yeah. So it's, basically they're just individual effects. I've been using some of them here and there, depending on what their uses are, and been getting some decent results. But Logic had to come up with some more core effects to compete with the third-party plugins. Why? People are already buying, Logic, so why would you need to do that? Lay it down, it's going to fall. So they came up with this kind of plugin suite. This one's called Phat Effects. So you can see, remember I was mentioning, Bit Crusher. This is kind of their play on Bit Crusher. So you can go in and now turn on and off different parts of this. What's the word I want to call it? We'll call it a plugin suite. Why not? So as I'm playing signals out through this, and I want to make this more defined so you can see some of these. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to get rid of this bus. I'm going to get rid of this track, actually. Go back to my original track. I'm going to delete track 8. Bye-bye track 8. I'm going to go back to my original one, which is over here, 3. Unmute that. Go back to hide the rest of them. Clean up my mixer really quick because I don't need 2 auxes. So we'll delete that. Sorry, delete. Boom. And there we go. Just like to clean things up so I don't have things floating around, especially in a project that I'm working on. And we're going to go ahead and put that Phat Effects on this. So I'm actually going to dump the Space Designer and the directional mixer right now. We'll go down to multi-effects and we'll go to Phat Effects. So they do have some of these presets here. A lot of it is for instrument-based stuff, but I have seen people use instrument-based plugins on vocals a lot. So there's some bass stuff, there's some drum stuff, There's some rhythmic stuff and some synth stuff. So let's go into synth for a moment and just see what AM Zapper can make our signals sound like now. And I'm sure it's going to be awful, but let's take a listen. So I don't know if you could hear it, but there was like little high frequency zaps going on in that. It may not translate well through my microphone and into Zoom, but it was happening. And it's actually pretty cool where very similar to like the drummer plugin, where you can move around a node and change the way it reacts. So you can see as I moved around that node, there are some parameters here that are changing their settings to adjust for that. So if I put it over here, there'd probably be a lot more little frequency zaps. There's some other ones here. The bit ringer for a snare, which obviously is going to sound very ringy. So this really creates this high frequency tonal part to that. So you can actually hear a lot more of the high frequencies of the vocal track. Here it is. So you can hear when it goes up to that, whoa, it goes really high. And there's like this really nasty high frequency like thing that sounds like it's chewing on it. I love that part of it. What else? We got some rhythmic stuff, liquid groove, which means it's going to have some timing issues here. Let's hear what that sounds like. So you can see there was a timing, right? It was a groove based signal. So the effect took place during a groove, a timed moment. You can see the cycling going on here and what frequencies were involved with that. And as I moved it around, it changed those parameters a little bit. So cool thing to play with, man. This is a relatively useful tool in certain cases. I don't know if I would spend, a lot of time doing this, but if you're producing electronic sound, this actually lends itself very well to electronic music. So that's the Phat effects. Let's take a look at the other one. This is step effects. Again, similar layout, similar color. Here now you can actually see that there's a cycling sequencer going on. So when I then put my effect into it, things are going to start happening. So, obviously they have simple gated, which now has descriptors that tells you what's going on. So droplets, that's interesting. Let's see. Here it is. So it's a lot wetter up here, a little drier down here. So that's a cool one. I find, you're going to get the most effect out of something like that. Again, for electronic music. Let's see what else is here. We got some glitched. That should be interesting. Let's see what that's all about. It's still running through its cycle, so let it run its course here until we get to the signal, and here we go. I'll turn it up a little bit so you can. Here it is. So again, if you can recall what I said at the beginning of the week, a lot of these changes that were made to Logic were done with the home studio producer in mind. So again, a lot of home studio producers are going to be doing electronic music, right? Because they're going to do everything in the box. They're not going to have a full drum kit or the mics to kind of go with that. So a lot of stuff they're going to be doing is MIDI based and vocal mic recording based. So that's what they've done to these plugins. They made them specific to that home studio producer. Let's pick out one more here just to see what other cool stuff is. And let's do a warped one. I want to see what this is. We'll do self-generating sci-fi. That'll be interesting. Let's see what happens here. So again, adding a lot of little textures into that, some distortion depending on where I'm dragging it to, adding a little bit to the mix and the master, doing your filter cutoffs here for high and low frequency. Like I said, again, great for the home studio producer. And then, of course, you could automate all this, right? We could actually go through this, put ourselves into an automation mode, and just pick out the in this case, the step effect, and then we can go ahead and automate any one of these parameters of the plugin. So if I want to be automating the filter, and I would add filter cutoff, and there it is. That was a very automatable thing that when I move this around, it was changing where that is. So I would be able to then, in a write mode here, let's go over to this, playing back, be able to mess with it a little bit. Sorry, I was in a not in the right mode. Yeah. There we go. So you can see as I'm moving around the button here, or the node, those changes all were recorded when I'm in an automation mode. Again, just utilizing the tools that are here in the software. And then I can practice that move over and over and over again until I got, until I got the result that I was looking for. So that, for me, is one of the bigger changes that were done here in Logic, because once you have that plugin set up and ready to go, automation should become fairly easy. We are going to, clearly take time to kind of peruse through these plugins because there is so much new content. There's a lot of new things to learn and to figure out. And right off the bat, I always want to check to see what new content entered things that were just released. So like amps and pedals is a relatively new concept to Logic, even though it's been around for a few years. In the span of the lifetime of Logic, Amp Designer and Bass Designer and Pedal Board were very, very new. So I always want to just go ahead and peruse the plugins and see if anything crazy new has changed. It doesn't look like it. It might have added some new content. Looks like in the bass realm, they added a very separate menu here where I can actually go in and select different cabinets and different amp heads. Awesome. But, nothing tremendously overwhelmingly new. Probably just very basic stuff out there. The imaging stuff, binaural post-processing is interesting. That really hasn't changed. I mean, it's, again, already been updated in the last, I don't know, few years, so they probably didn't spend too much time doing that. My basic distortion plugin did a change back in 9 to 10. So it took on some of the new look of Logic. And if you played with the old one, it was actually really nasty. I didn't like it at all. Modulation, things like the chorus, has already taken on the newer look and version. So that's a popular plugin. People use chorus a lot just to kind of open up the sound a little bit. We know that most of our EQs are probably going to look updated and new. We know what a regular EQ looks like. There it is. Looks great. Love it. And then I think that was, the utility Autosampler. Well, that's interesting. So we went through the full sampler. We went through the quick sampler. What's the auto sampler? Let's take a look. So we have a couple of things we can load in here. This is a pre-designated layout for drums. So not that the samples are in here, but it allows us to go in and now program in a 1, 2, 3, 4 octave audio sample for drums. Very cool. So they're kind of like templates. Sustained bidirectional loops. So obviously the blue keys represent where your samples would rest. And of course, if I bring in my keyboard, I don't think I'm able to trigger much here because there's no sound loaded in. I'm just making sure none of these were preloaded. Now they look good. So nothing was preloaded, which is great. And then of course we can probably drag and drop our audio into here. I'm thinking what we can do is play back. Hold on. And we can find, and this is audio 3, so let's see. Okay, so we do have sound coming in, which is awesome. And since we are on an audio track, maybe the audio sampler won't do that. So we could try to put that up on a software instrument track and see if it creates a different layout for us. I don't think so. I think the intent of the auto sampler was to take something from a track, and instead of having to cut it up, save it as an audio file, it was to take it and then put it on another track. But let's just be sure of that. I'm going to go ahead and go into utility, auto sampler, mono. Let's see. So we have some sort of layout here, which is good. Nothing's still there and nothing still to sample, but I guess allows us to bring in samples if that's the case. Sure. And it's going to save it as an EXS. So that means it's going to save it as an old school EXS24 file, which then allows us to use it as a sample. So yeah, it's about building samples. I don't know if I would use that. It's not as intuitive as maybe the sampler or the quick sampler. So I probably wouldn't go too far with that. I would stick to my sampler and my quick sampler. That would probably be the best way to get it done, because then you can record directly into the sampler, right? In this case, that one doesn't allow you to do that. And that's it. I pretty much looks through all the plugins, all the changes there. There are still some more changes we haven't gotten to. But I wanted to kind of go through the plugins today because it's an important part of our Logic package, that when you buy it, you're getting all this stuff for free. And by free, I mean you are paying for the software, but you're getting a lot of stuff for your money. So anybody have any questions about anything we covered today with the Space Designer, Delay Designer, which we didn't spend too much time on because I didn't have the package ready, but we did the Phat effects, we did the step effects, we messed around with automation, which you should already know. We messed around with how to bus and send timed effects through a bus to an auxiliary track, and then the proper way of blending that, how you would get there. Again, kind of repetitive in a lot of stuff we do, but really there is a finite amount of stuff to do in a software. I mean, there's only so many ways you can do it. It does seem like a lot at first, but once you get through them all and figure out which one's the best for you, there really aren't other ways to go. There's only a certain amount of ways you can do one function. All right. Well, guys, listen, enjoy a very, very hot day today and get out there and get some exercise. Be good. Feel fine. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow at 10 a.m. Holla, 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 holla.